The year is 1932, and you find yourself in a rather interesting place. Neither properly dead, nor properly alive. Waiting for something, anything, to break you out of this cycle of pain, suffering, and trial. But in 20th century Ukraine, overrun by the great USSR, nothing waits for you except famine, starvation, and death. The stench from the bodies is overwhelming. Alive corpses, starving for days and weeks at a time, their bodies rotting from the absence of food or water. Strewn amongst mothers killing their own children just to have something to eat, for something to put on the table. And then, one day, it seems that the sun has come out again. Men from the government, almost like the Messiah, knock on your door and shove you into a van to take you to some faraway place. But for you, anywhere is better than here. Anywhere is better than this corrupted land, this place where the tree of evil has taken such a strong root that no axe could ever stop it. The doors of the van open, and you suddenly realize that the sun you were smiling upon was a curse, some illusion, because you have found your way to the Gulag, the concentration camps that claimed tens of millions of lives. Camps where some considered it better to die than to continue on living, where guards would let loose rabid dogs to kill those still miraculously left alive, where people would live in cell blocks made of ice and the terror of their own heart. You were better off being eaten by your own family than coming to this place. This machine that rips the very will to live, this monstrosity that has revealed exactly what our species is capable of. And it appears that, unlike our other attributes, our evil and fear have no limit. Now, how did we get here? Was it oppression? Was it inhumanity? Or was it just a complete disregard for human life? How did such a piteous state befall one of the greatest empires known to man? The answer is fear. The fear of being thrown into camps for saying but a word. The fear of being exiled. The fear of confronting the forces known to be evil. The fear of taking responsibility and living great in accordance with one's morals, even if it meant living short. It takes time for problems to grow. It takes time for the dragon to grow from a minute inconvenience into a monstrosity. And each time we succumb to this fear, each time we give our dragons more fuel, we fuel the beasts even more. We allow the beasts to grow a little bit larger, day after day, month after month, for years. Until one day, it's time for us to face the beast. And we fail. We fail, and we go to the very concentration camps that we were avoiding. Strange, isn't it? And yet, it was the same fate endured by the characters of Strange Flowers by Donal Ryan, a novel that embodies fear, where one character learns to uproot this destructive force, and the other indulges in it. Really, this book is all about our internal demons, and how we go about getting rid of them. Do we become confrontational and attack our flaws head on? Do we decide to instead accept our flaws, to treat those negative traits as an inevitable part of ourselves? Or do we indulge in them, refusing to accept our flaws as negative attributes in the first place? The novel certainly has a lot to say on this topic. Set in 20th century Ireland, The story revolves around the trials and tribulations of the Gladney family as they grow and mature as individuals. Through its main idea, Strange Flowers suggests that it is by voluntarily confronting the demons that one fears the most that one finds the strength to overcome them. The prime example being Alexander, the protagonist, as he finds the strength to confront his fear of responsibility through providing for his family. Near the genesis of the story, he is left on a crossroads, conflicted between performing his duty as a man and his overwhelming desire for the antagonist, MOLL. But by demonstrating the courage to make this choice, to choose duty over desire, he overcomes said dilemma and transforms into a reliable figure. However, the opposite of this is illustrated as well. MOLL's indecisiveness regarding her orientation and sexuality, her fear of society's thoughts and opinions, leads her to live a life filled to the brim with regrets, tearing apart her family and leaving her emotionally unavailable to others by the narrative's resolution. Both Alexander and MOLL's respective actions reflect a dichotomy between a person who overcomes fear and one who succumbs to it, with both individuals recognizing and dealing with the ultimate consequences of their actions. In summation, the strength to overcome life's obstacles and demons is found by approaching them in an open and confrontational manner, shown through Alexander accepting his responsibilities and MOLL denying them. In fact, Alexander represents the ideal individual, the black man struggling to grasp the ideas of parenthood and love. His metamorphosis throughout the story stems directly from his love of MOLL, forcing him to overcome his fear of sin, failure, and responsibility and become a man of stoic gravitas, a man that can be relied on by the family unit and society. Similarly, MOLL, the antagonist, represents the archetypal failed daughter, wife, and mother. Whereas Alexander seeks to fulfill his role as a man, MOLL instead despises her role in society, wanting to reject traditional femininity. As a lesbian individual, she fears rural Ireland's highly Christian society. Yet, rather than confronting this fear as Alexander did, she instead becomes consumed by it. MOLL abandons her parents as a teenager and becomes emotionally distant from Alexander throughout their marriage, attempting to escape from her difficulties as opposed to alleviating them. Ultimately, her son Joshua removes himself from her life for this very reason: MOLL's refusal to either return Alexander's comforting love or to deny it completely, and her refusal to fully acknowledge her responsibilities and face her fears. Her willing ignorance, her lack of confrontation towards her fear, forces intense character development on all the various individuals throughout this narrative, and ultimately makes her quite the transformative antagonist. In reality, both Alexander and MOLL represent fascinating archetypes: good and evil, God and Satan, order and chaos, and the novel takes great advantage of this by developing both of these characters simultaneously. This allows us to process the actions of both characters and understand their real-time consequences, how one rises above his demons and ends up living a meaningful, productive life, and the other simply falls from grace. This demonstrates, quite frankly, excellent character development on the part of Donal Ryan. Nearly all the characters in this literary work are multidimensional and round, as opposed to unidimensional. Now, as a quick recap, round characters are those with human-like depth, well-rounded and developed characters that, unlike flat characters, actually have a sense of realism to them, almost like you might know them in real life. Alexander, MOLL, Paddy, MOLL's father, Kit, MOLL's mother, Joshua and Honey, which is Joshua's love interest, they all fall underneath this category of round characters. The novel effectively conveys the dichotomy of man through these individuals, showing at times their divine Apollonian traits of empathy and compassion, and at times their Dionysian traits of spite and cowardice. Despite the vast numbers of characters introduced and often developed simultaneously in this novel, the only ones who come close to falling flat are Alexander's caring neighbors and, to some extent, MOLL's love interest, Miss Jackman. However, it is definitely worth stating that the latter of these two would almost certainly be a round character if only one could really understand the foundation behind her motivations as an individual. Though, in a book with so many well-developed characters, having one or two flat characters is, I think, perfectly fine. The characters who undergo the most change in this novel, or the dynamic characters, if you will, are none other than our protagonist and antagonist. The former learning to take ownership of his life and his responsibilities, and the latter discovering and wanting to repent for her mistakes, slowly unearthing the lies from which her life was led by the end of the novel. In fact, one could even argue that their son, Joshua, is dynamic as well, wanting to commit suicide upon the death of his role model, his father, yet overcoming said demons and returning to the home that he once left. The remainder of these characters are all static, a backdrop, if you will, to the stories of Alexander, MOLL, and Joshua. Kit and Patty remain worrisome and grateful at their daughter's return. Honey remains a calm and compassionate listener to Joshua's rather unending troubles, and Miss Jackman a somewhat spiteful yet forthright individual. While these characters are certainly developed, an adequate arc is not present. Though, once again, the fact that the story has so many well-developed characters already alone is an accomplishment, so huge props to Mr. Ryan to accomplish that. In fact, this comparison of contrary concepts is a recurring theme throughout this book. Strange Flowers explores a variety of opposing topics, often pinned against each other to create rather fascinating dichotomies. Examples of this involve discrimination and acceptance, desire and restraint, family and individualism, confrontation and cowardice, religion and atheism, and a number of others. These dichotomies are displayed incredibly well throughout the different conflicts that each of the characters face, where each character has to deal with their own unique set of challenges that they must overcome, and each of them approaches the solution to these said challenges in an individualistic and unique manner. For example, a prominent conflict in this novel is that of person versus society. Alexander confronting racism and discrimination, yet overcoming these hurdles and becoming a vital part of his community. MOLL's comparison between her sexuality and traditional Christian beliefs, and Joshua's struggle to come of age and really live up to societal standards of success. This book also develops multiple person versus self conflicts. Alexander's sense of responsibility compared with his love for MOLL. MOLL's regret for losing Joshua against her desire for embracing her sexuality, and Patty's sense of protection and pride pinned against his understanding of his low socioeconomic status. In fact, after one point, Patty is verbally abused by the son of his landlord, who ironically, by the end of the book, is murdered after it is revealed that he is the husband of MOLL's love. Person versus supernatural conflicts are also well developed in this book, particularly towards the end of the novel, where MOLL Gladney and Ellen Jackman's relationship conflict with religion, and they both attempt to justify their actions to a higher being, almost like what we see in Romeo and Juliet, when Romeo and Juliet end up meeting each other at the party for the first time, though that is obviously more of a tangent. The last major conflicts in this novel fall underneath the person versus person category. A misogynistic, privileged, and spoiled Lucas Jackman attempting to assault MOLL, setting the stage for a physical conflict between him and his own wife, Miss Jackman, and this conflict inevitably leads to his death, though surprisingly, neither Moll nor Ellen show any remorse at having murdered a living individual, showing us specifically just the kind of person that Moll has become after running away for so long. And in fact, the setting is rather masterfully chosen to act as a catalyst for these conflicts. Given that it is set in a rural area, it allows more traditional beliefs to take root and provides a sense of isolation so that an event such as the murder of Lucas Jackman can take place without too much suspicion or plot holes. Combined, these four main conflicts lay the foundation for most of the character development illustrated throughout the novel, and show us how these changes affect the lives of our characters. But really, nothing in any novel matters if it doesn't help us improve our own lives. If what we're reading doesn't help us to live a better and more fulfilling life, to help us find our own flaws and become better people, well then, what's the point in reading it? Fortunately, however, this is not the case with Strange Flowers. As we discussed, the main idea suggests how voluntary confrontation is the best way to confront our demons. The theme, however, goes deeper than this, describing the very root cause of these demons in the first place. The novel Strange Flowers by Donal Ryan is an ode to fear, suggesting that neglecting the root cause of this emotion corrupts mankind's ability to sacrifice short-term pleasures for long-term contentment, ultimately bringing about the vicious downfall of all societies, relationships, and individuals. This is an incredibly profound message, since one of the reasons that humanity has advanced to such a grand degree is due to our ability to sacrifice the present for the future. Our species knows that doing painful work in the present can yield us massive rewards in the future. For example, while gathering wood to build a shelter might be painful in the present, it gives us future benefits in the form of comfort and security. While trying to fix a relationship with someone else is difficult and emotionally troubling in the present, it can lead to a more stable and happier relationship in the future. However, fear corrupts this ability. It encourages the individual to only look at the short term, to run away from what terrifies and threatens them rather than facing it. And when man becomes focused exclusively on present comfort, when fear drives him away as far as possible from the problem at hand, society falls. No longer do people focus on the longer-term consequences of their actions, on how their escapism today might spark immense, unforeseen consequences in the future. This concept was illustrated, in my opinion, extremely well in Strange Flowers, where Moll was so overwhelmed by her fear of society and what her parents would think that she did nothing but run away. She physically ran away from her parents. She emotionally ran away from her relationship with her husband. And most of all, she ran away from her responsibilities as a mother, ultimately causing the collapse of the Glaney family unit. In fact, towards the conclusion, she even acknowledges that her decisions were cowardly, that her fear ended up destroying her life. Moll regrets the way she turned on Ellen Jackman and blamed her for her contorted existence, when all along the truth was clear and plain that Moll herself was a coward. But what kind of strength would it have taken before Joshua left to tell the truth of who she really was? Alexander instead confronts this fear. Not only does he realize that his feelings are leading him to cowardice, but he also acts on this realization and works to become a better father and husband. Every man is cut a certain way, his father told him. Every change he makes requires a cut that makes him smaller. That's why you've always got to be your own man's son. Don't be no one else's man but yours, ever and always. Alexander cursed his memory, his minute logging of his father's words, his inability to shake the feeling that he was reducing himself by loving MOLL, who gave nearly nothing of herself. Alexander's change, while never stated, he never explicitly says that he's going to face his fears and accept responsibility, is quite evident in how his son views him. Joshua holds Alexander in such high regard that it is clear that the protagonist did indeed overcome his fears and end up becoming an amazing father. In essence, Alexander's character development is shown through the eyes of Joshua. As Joshua describes the memory to Honey, he can almost feel his father's hands on him, lifting him like he was made of paper onto his broad shoulders. He feels himself unshackled from gravity. He feels the folds of skin on his father's brow beneath his fingers and palms. He feels his father's big hands on his knees, holding him steady as they crest the hill and start down the far side towards the stream. He hears his father's gentle, rumbling laugh. He feels the pureness of his love for his parents and of their love for them. The strength of it, as huge and solid as the earth itself. In fact, the theme of fear is evident in this quotation as well. Joshua's fear of being rejected by his love interest, Honey, coupled with the fear of him never seeing his family again, renders him suicidal and depressed. Rather than sorting issues out with his family and mom returning to the home that he once left, he instead chooses to just run away again and again, exactly like his mother. Ultimately, this is precisely what the novel is about: how we deal with fear, and the consequences of not dealing with this emotion. Recently, hundreds of Ukrainians in Calgary commemorated the victims of the deadly Ukrainian famine, where bodies were being laid in the streets. The famine that killed millions, where the death count is still unknown. The famine that could have been prevented if it were not for the silence of the tens and millions of people living in Soviet Russia. If it were not for the fear of prosecution and death that compelled the citizens to side with immorality and injustice rather than truth and integrity. It is said that the 10th stage of any genocide is denial. Whether it is the Jewish peoples who were refusing to believe that something like the Holocaust would ever affect them, or the Soviets refusing to believe that their government would ever do something so evil. The more we deny our fears, the more we refuse to battle and confront them, the greater they end up growing. Until one day, they reveal themselves in their most terrible and devastating form. Our class saw this through The Veldt as well, where both George and Martha neglect their responsibilities as parents, resulting in their children failing to see their purpose and ultimately slaughtering their parents themselves. And it's also not just me saying this. Decades of psychological research have shown that confronting obstacles and fears directly is the healthiest and most effective way to deal with them, far better than avoiding them. Biologically, this has to do with habituation cycles present inside our nervous system and ultimately regulate the way that we deal with new stimuli. As put eloquently by Dr. Noam Spancher, moreover, when you avoid something that scares you, you tend to experience a sense of failure. Every time you avoid a feared object or situation, your anxiety gains strength while you lose some. You accumulate another experience of failure and another piece of evidence attesting to your weakness. Finally, avoidance eliminates practice. Without practice, it is difficult to gain mastery. Without mastery, confidence is less likely to rise. In summation, Strange Flowers illustrates the deadly consequences of neglecting our fears and inner demons, suggesting that the flower of fear poisons our ability to live. We must reject this fear, this strange flower, and confront the obstacles in our lives. Thank you, and I hope you will check out this awesome 5-star book.